12 years I kept that sinking ship afloat, and they thought they could toss me out like dead weight. They didn't know that in that termination envelope, they'd just handed me the keys to burn down their entire future. The non-compete they never bothered to read properly. It had a loophole wide enough to drive a $50 million client through. And when the smoke clears, I'll be the one standing tallest, watching their empire crumble from my new corner office across the street. My name is Madison Hale, and for 12 years, I was the invisible backbone of Silver Pine Strategies. You wouldn't know it from the company newsletters or the quarterly all-hands meetings where executives paraded their successes. My face never graced those PowerPoint slides. My name never echoed through the glass-walled conference rooms during congratulatory speeches. But when shit hit the fan at 3:30 in the morning, when a $50 million contract teetered on the edge of collapse, guess whose phone rang? I remember every late-night crisis like battle scars. The Patterson Industries meltdown when their entire data infrastructure crashed 2 days before launch. I rebuilt it from scratch, while the C-suite slept peacefully in their suburban mansions. The Meridian Group's lawsuit threat over a botched implementation. I spent 72 hours straight negotiating with their legal team, surviving on nothing but black coffee and pure determination. The executives took credit for the save. Of course, they always did. But Northbridge Dynamics was different. They saw through the corporate theater. Sandra Cole, their vice president of operations, had worked with me directly during their initial onboarding 5 years ago. She watched me untangle the mess our sales team had promised. Impossible deliverables, unrealistic timelines, features that didn't even exist in our product roadmap. I made it happen anyway, coding workarounds, building custom solutions, essentially creating a bespoke system within our platform just for them. You're the only reason we stayed. Sandra told me once during a client dinner, while my boss claimed credit for the account retention 2 tables over, "We know who really runs this show." I believed my dedication would eventually pay off. That's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? Work hard, stay loyal, and the company will take care of you. I watched younger, less experienced colleagues get promoted around me, their primary qualification being their ability to golf with the CEO or their talent for corporate buzzword bingo. But I stayed. I had a mortgage, a life built around this job, and most importantly, I had relationships with clients who trusted me implicitly. The warning signs were there, subtle at first. New management consultants prowling the halls, measuring everything, questioning processes that had worked for years. The word restructuring started appearing in company-wide emails, always cushioned with phrases like exciting opportunities and strategic evolution. I'd survived 3 rounds of layoffs, each time becoming more essential as I absorbed the responsibilities of departed colleagues. My workspace told the story of my tenure, a corner desk I'd claimed through squatter's rights rather than assignment, surrounded by the detritus of 12 years. Coffee-stained notebooks filled with client secrets. 3 monitors displaying dashboards I'd built to track what really mattered. A drawer full of thank you cards from clients that leadership never saw. This wasn't just a job. It was my fortress, my identity. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become too valuable in my current position to promote. Why move me up when I was perfectly positioned to clean up everyone else's messes? I was the safety net that allowed mediocrity to flourish above me. Every successful project had my fingerprints on it, hidden beneath layers of executive signatures. But comfort bred complacency, and I made the fatal error of thinking I was irreplaceable. In the corporate world, everyone is replaceable. It's just a matter of how much chaos follows their departure. I was about to teach Silver Pine Strategies exactly how much chaos that could be. Derek Whitman arrived on a Monday morning in September, strutting through our office like he'd just conquered Wall Street instead of accepting a mid-level management position. Fresh MBA, crisp suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The email announcing his appointment as Director of Customer Experience had gone out the previous Friday at 4:45 p.m. Classic corporate move, dropping bombs before the weekend. We're thrilled to welcome Derek to the Silver Pine family. The message gushed. His innovative approach to client relationship management will help us transition into our next phase of growth. Translation. Someone's nephew needed a job, and they'd created a position that overlapped significantly with what I'd been doing for over a decade. Our first meeting set the tone for everything that followed. Derek scheduled a synchronization session with me, which turned out to be him talking at me for 45 minutes about paradigm shifts and synergistic value propositions. He'd clearly memorized a TED Talk word for word. "Madison, I've been reviewing your client interaction logs," he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd discovered something profound. "Your approach is very traditional. We need to pivot toward empathy-driven disruption." Empathy-driven disruption. I kept my voice neutral, a skill I'd perfected over 12 years of dealing with corporate bullshit. Exactly. His eyes lit up like I'd validated his existence. We need to revolutionize how we conceptualize customer pain points, transform obstacles into opportunities for experiential growth. What Derek didn't understand, what he couldn't understand from his 2 days of reviewing spreadsheets, was that Northbridge Dynamics didn't want disruption. They wanted consistency, reliability, and someone who actually understood their complex technical requirements. They wanted someone who knew that their system crashed every time someone tried to run a report at midnight and had already built a workaround. They wanted someone who remembered that Sandra Cole was allergic to shellfish and always ordered vegetarian at client dinners, not because of any dietary preference, but because she didn't trust most restaurants to avoid cross-contamination. But Derek had plans. Oh, did he have plans? He started scheduling innovation workshops, where we'd spend 3 hours using sticky notes to map out customer journey experiences. He created new reporting templates that required twice the work to produce half the insight. He insisted on joining every client call, interrupting technical discussions to ask how everyone was feeling about the process. The Northbridge team started texting me directly. "Who's the new guy? Can we schedule calls when he's not available? Is everything okay over there?" I watched Derek systematically insert himself into every client relationship I'd built, not through competence or value add, but through sheer organizational maneuvering. He CC'd himself on every email, invited himself to every meeting, and slowly began referring to my clients as our clients, then eventually just his clients. The most infuriating part was his complete lack of actual knowledge. During a critical technical review with Northbridge, Derek confidently explained how we could leverage blockchain technology to optimize their supply chain management. Northbridge was a consulting firm. They didn't have a supply chain. Sandra Cole's expression during that call would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so mortifying. "Madison always handles our technical requirements," Sandra said carefully, trying to redirect the conversation. Of course, Derek beamed. Madison's institutional knowledge is valuable for historical context, but we're moving toward a more holistic, future-focused engagement model. Historical context, 12 years of keeping their systems running, and I'd been reduced to historical context. But Derek wasn't just incompetent. He was strategic about it. He started building alliances with the newer executives, the ones who spoke his language of disruption and transformation. He presented beautiful slide decks full of meaningless metrics that somehow always showed improvement. He took credit for the client retention rate I'd maintained for years, repackaging it as the result of his revolutionary approach. I saw the writing on the wall when he started talking about organizational optimization and talent reallocation. These weren't just buzzwords anymore. They were weapons, and Derek was aiming them directly at anyone who might remember a time before his arrival. Anyone who might question whether the emperor was actually wearing clothes. The new guy wasn't just here to shake things up. He was here to clear the field, and I was standing directly in his path. The Whisper campaign started in October. At first, it was so subtle I thought I was imagining things. Conversations that stopped when I entered the break room. Meeting invites that arrived suspiciously late. Sometimes after the meeting had already started. My name mysteriously dropping off email chains where I'd been the primary contributor. Then came the feedback sessions. Derek had instituted these new monthly reviews where team members would provide constructive insights about their colleagues. Anonymous, of course, for transparency and psychological safety, he claimed. Madison, Derek said during our one-on-one, sliding a printed report across his desk. Some concerns have been raised about your communication style. I scanned the comments. Resistant to change. Not aligned with new company values. Difficult to collaborate with. Generic corporate assassination bullets. Impossible to refute because they meant nothing and everything simultaneously. I'm surprised, I said carefully. My client satisfaction scores are the highest in the department. That's exactly the problem. Derek leaned forward, his expression grave. You're too focused on individual achievements rather than team synergy. This isn't about you anymore, Madison. It's about the collective. The collective. Right. The same collective that had relied on my individual achievements to keep our biggest clients from jumping ship. The documentation started next. Every interaction required a follow-up email. Every decision needed approval from Derek's newly formed strategy committee. Tasks that I'd handled autonomously for years suddenly required 3 meetings and a slide deck to execute. It was death by bureaucracy, designed to make me look slow, uncooperative, difficult. HR started appearing more frequently, always with Derek, always with concerns about cultural fit and adaptation to evolving workplace dynamics. Rachel from HR, who I'd helped through her divorce 2 years ago, couldn't meet my eyes during these sessions. We just want to ensure everyone's aligned with Silverpine's new direction, she'd say, reading from a script Derek had obviously prepared. The isolation was surgical. My desk, once a hub where colleagues stopped to chat or ask advice, became a dead zone. Junior employees who'd sought my mentorship suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The technical team I'd worked with for years started routing questions through Derek instead of coming directly to me. Even lunch became a minefield. I'd arrive at the cafeteria to find tables mysteriously full. Conversations awkwardly stilted when I approached. Once, I overheard 2 colleagues discussing the Madison situation. She just doesn't get it, one said. Derek's trying to modernize, and she's stuck in the past. I heard she yelled at him in a meeting. The other added, I'd never raised my voice at work, ever, but truth doesn't matter when the narrative's already been written. The Northbridge situation gave Derek his opening. During a critical deployment, he'd overridden my recommendations and pushed an untested update to their system. It crashed, naturally, but in the post-mortem, somehow the story became that I'd failed to properly communicate the risks. This is a learning opportunity, Derek announced to the team, his hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. Madison's experience is valuable, but we need to ensure knowledge transfer happens more effectively. Knowledge transfer. Corporate speak for, we're going to extract everything you know before we throw you away. Then came the Tuesday morning that changed everything. The email appeared at 8:15 a.m., innocuously titled, Performance Alignment Meeting. Please join us in Conference Room C at 10 a.m., attendance mandatory. Conference Room C, the one without windows, the one they used for terminations. I spent the next hour and 45 minutes in a strange state of calm. I backed up my personal files, forwarded important emails to my private account, and made a list of client contacts, not because I planned to violate any agreements, but because I knew Derek would try to lock me out of everything the moment I left that room. At 9:55, I walked to Conference Room C. Derek was already there, positively glowing. Rachel from HR sat beside him, a manila folder in front of her that might as well have had termination stamped across it in red letters. Madison. Derek smiled, that practiced, empty smile. Please, have a seat. Rachel cleared her throat. We've called this meeting to discuss some organizational changes. As you know, Silverpine is evolving, and with that evolution comes the need to ensure our team composition aligns with our strategic objectives. You're firing me. I didn't phrase it as a question. Derek's smile widened. We prefer to think of it as replacing inefficiencies with opportunities for mutual growth. Replacing inefficiencies. I memorized those words, burned them into my brain, because Derek had no idea that he'd just handed me the exact phrase I'd used to destroy him. I sat in that windowless conference room, watching Derek's self-satisfied expression, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, that would come later. This was clarity, sharp and crystalline, like suddenly seeing the solution to a problem that had been staring you in the face all along. Before we proceed, I said calmly, I need to review my contractual obligations. I assume you've prepared a comprehensive exit package that accounts for all my existing agreements. Derek waved dismissively. Standard non-compete, 2 weeks severance per year of service. Rachel has all the paperwork. All my agreements, I pressed. Everything's been reviewed by legal, Rachel interjected, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. Your employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause? I nodded slowly. They'd reviewed my employment contract. Of course they had. But 3 years ago, when Northbridge Dynamics nearly walked away after a competitor offered them a sweeter deal, I'd done something unusual, something that saved the account then and would save me now. The dual retainer agreement. It had been Sandra Cole's idea. Actually, Northbridge wanted to ensure continuity of service regardless of Silverpine's internal changes. They'd been burned before by vendors who shuffled personnel without warning. So we'd drafted a unique arrangement. Northbridge retained me personally as a consultant, parallel to their contract with Silverpine. The company had been so desperate to keep the $50 million account that they'd signed off, without really reading the fine print. The beautiful part, Clause 12b subsection 3. The non-solicitation and non-compete provisions of this agreement apply exclusively to the relationship between Madison Hale and Northbridge Dynamics, not between Madison Hale and Silverpine Strategies or any other entities. In their eagerness to lock me into the Northbridge account, they'd accidentally created a loophole. The non-compete protected Northbridge from me, not the other way around. And since Derek was terminating me, effectively severing Silverpine's ability to serve the contract they'd signed, well, that opened some interesting possibilities. I'll need an hour to review everything, I said. Derek checked his Rolex impatiently. Fine, we'll reconvene at 11. I went back to my desk, but not to review their pathetic severance package. Instead, I pulled up the Northbridge folder, buried 3 levels deep in the shared drive where Derek had never bothered to look. Every email, every contract modification, every addendum, including the dual retainer agreement with its beautiful, legally bulletproof language. I downloaded everything onto a flash drive, my own files. Nothing proprietary to Silverpine except for contracts with my name on them. Then I pulled up the original service agreement between Silverpine and Northbridge. Page 47, Section 18. Service provider warrants continuous access to designated personnel critical to contract execution. I was the only designated personnel listed. My termination would put Silverpine in breach. At 10:55, I walked back to Conference Room C with a single folder. Derek had brought reinforcements, the CFO, head of legal, even the CEO dialing in via video conference. They thought they were witnessing a standard termination. They were actually attending their own funeral. I've reviewed the severance package, I began, placing my folder on the table but not opening it. Before I sign anything, I need clarification on how you're planning to manage the Northbridge transition. That's not your concern anymore, Derek said smoothly. I'll be taking over the account personally. I see. I pulled out a single piece of paper, the signature page of the dual retainer agreement, with the Silverpine Legal Department stamp prominently displayed. And you've reviewed this. The head of legal reached for it, his face paling as he read. What is this? That, I said quietly, is the agreement you authorized 3 years ago, the one that makes me, not Silverpine, the primary service provider for Northbridge Dynamics, the one that includes a mutual 60-day notice requirement for any changes in service personnel. The room went silent. Even the CEO had stopped typing. But you're terminating me effective immediately, I continued, which means you're in breach of contract with your largest client. The penalties for that are substantial. Page 12, if you'd like to review them. Derek snatched the paper, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, panic. This can't be legal. Your legal department approved it, I said, nodding to their head counsel. Signed and stamped. Would you like to see the email chain where you personally expedited approval to save the account? The head of legal was frantically pulling up files on his laptop. This is accurate. How did we not? Because you never thought the invisible employee would be important enough to review. I finished for him. You assumed I was furniture, part of the infrastructure, replaceable. The CEO's voice crackled through the speaker. What do you want? Nothing, I said, standing up. I want absolutely nothing from you. Sign my termination papers. I'll take my 2 weeks severance per year. That's 24 weeks of pay, and then we'll let the cards fall where they may. You can't poach our client. Derek stammered. The non-compete protects Northbridge from me, not you from Northbridge. Read it again. Derek, slowly this time. Maybe sound out the big words. I signed their termination papers with a flourish, grabbed my copies, and headed for the door. Madison, the CEO called out. We can discuss this. Perhaps we were hasty. You were right about one thing, I said, pausing at the door. It's time to replace inefficiencies. I looked directly at Derek. Starting today, I walked out of Silver Pine Strategies at 11:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, carrying a banker's box of personal items and wearing the same calm expression I'd perfected over 12 years of corporate warfare. Security escorted me to the door standard procedure, though Tom, the guard who'd known me since my first day, couldn't meet my eyes. Sorry, Madison, he mumbled. Don't be, I said. You might want to update your LinkedIn profile, though. In my car, I pulled out my personal phone and composed a single text message to Sandra Cole. I'm free. Her response came in 30 seconds, conference call in 1 hour. Make it 2. I want to be home for this. The drive home was surreal. 12 years of the same commute, and suddenly I was going the opposite direction of traffic at noon. The radio played some vapid pop song about liberation. I actually laughed, for the first time in months. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had 17 missed calls from Silver Pine. I ignored them all, poured myself a generous glass of the Macallan 18-year I'd been saving for a special occasion, and set up my laptop at the kitchen table. At 1:30 p.m. sharp, I dialed into the Northbridge conference line. Madison. Sandra's voice was warm but businesslike. I have James Morrison, our CEO, and our legal team on the line. Miss Hale. James Morrison's distinctive baritone filled my kitchen. Sandra's been briefing us on the situation. Are we to understand Silver Pine has terminated your employment? As of 90 minutes ago, yes. Without the required 60-day notice stipulated in our service agreement. Correct. There was a pause, then the sound of muffled conversation, papers shuffling, keyboards clicking. Miss Hale. Morrison continued. I'm going to be very direct. We've been dissatisfied with Silver Pine's direction for some time. Derek Whitman's innovations have been particularly concerning. Last week's system crash cost us nearly $3 million in lost productivity. I wasn't aware of the full impact, I said carefully. Because Derek didn't include you in the post-mortem, we noticed. Morrison's tone hardened. We also noticed that every successful resolution over the past 5 years has had your signature on it, while every failure has had his. Sandra jumped in. Madison, what we're about to propose needs to happen quickly. Our legal team has reviewed the dual retainer agreement. It's ironclad. Silver Pine is in breach of contract by terminating you without proper notice and transition planning. We're prepared to terminate our contract with Silver Pine immediately. Morrison said, The question is, are you prepared to continue serving Northbridge directly? I stared at the amber liquid in my glass, watching the afternoon sun refract through it. In what capacity? Senior strategic consultant, same services you've been providing. but at triple your current rate, reporting directly to Sandra, no bureaucracy, no committees, no PowerPoint decks about synergy, just you doing what you do best. Triple my rate, for one client instead of 12, without Derek? I'll need a formal offer in writing. I said, You'll have it within the hour, Madison. There's one more thing. Morrison paused. We want to announce this publicly, a press release. Northbridge Dynamics partners with Madison Hale for strategic consulting services. Your name, front and center. My name, after 12 years in the shadows. My actual name in a press release. Silverpine won't take this quietly, I warned. Let me worry about Silverpine, Morrison said, and there was something sharp in his voice. They've been coasting on your work while charging us premium rates for subpar service. It's time for consequences. At 2:45 p.m., while I was reviewing Northbridge's offer letter, more money than I'd ever dreamed of making, my phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague. Check your email, now. The message from Northbridge to Silverpine was marked high priority, copied to what looked like Silverpine's entire executive team. The subject line was simple. Contract termination, effective immediately. The body was a masterpiece of corporate brutality, breach of contract, failure to maintain service standards, violation of the continuity clause, immediate termination with prejudice, potential pursuit of damages for the recent system failure. $50 million, gone, just like that. My phone exploded. Calls from Derek, the CEO, the CFO, legal, HR, text messages ranging from pleading to threatening, emails with subject lines like urgent reconsideration and legal action warning. I forwarded them all to my new legal team at Northbridge, part of the package Morrison had arranged, and poured another Macallan. At 3:30 p.m., Derek sent a personal email from his private account. Madison, this is unnecessary. We can work something out. Please call me. I didn't respond, but I did open my laptop and pull up the Silverpine Slack workspace I could still access for another few hours. The chaos was beautiful. Channels lighting up with panicked messages. Emergency meetings being called. The sales team trying to figure out how to explain losing their biggest client to prospects. Someone had started a private channel called WTF Happened. Within minutes, it had 47 members. At 4 p.m. sharp, as I was contemplating a celebratory dinner, Sandra called personally. Thought you'd want to know, she said, barely suppressing laughter. Derek just sent us a proposal for managed transition services. He wants to consult on our transition away from Silverpine, for a fee, of course. You're joking. I'm not. He actually used the phrase, leverage my innovative methodologies to ensure seamless knowledge transfer. Madison, I think he doesn't realize you've been doing everything. He genuinely believes he can replace you. I thought about Derek's beautiful slide decks, his innovation workshops, his empathy-driven disruption. Let him try. Oh, we will. We've scheduled a meeting with him for tomorrow morning. We're going to ask him to walk us through a basic system architecture. Should be entertaining. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No anxiety dreams about missed deadlines or crashed systems. Just peaceful, perfect silence. And somewhere across town, Derek Whitman was about to learn that some inefficiencies are actually load-bearing walls. You can't replace what you never understood in the first place. Wednesday morning arrived with a thunderstorm, which felt appropriate. I woke at 7 a.m. to find my phone battery dead from the overnight flood of messages. When I plugged it in, the screen lit up with 137 notifications. I deleted them all without reading and made coffee. At 8:15 a.m., my former colleague Janet called from her personal phone. Madison, you need to know what's happening here. It's absolutely insane. I'm not sure I should. Please, just listen. Derek's in the conference room. Has been since 6 a.m., trying to figure out the Northbridge system architecture. He's got 3 engineers with him and they're completely lost. They just discovered you built custom APIs that aren't documented anywhere except in your personal notes. I smiled into my coffee. Those APIs had taken 6 months to perfect. creating seamless integrations that Derek had claimed were basic connectivity solutions in his reports to leadership. "There's more," Janet continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The board called an emergency meeting. They're flying in from New York. Someone leaked the Northbridge termination letter to the entire company. The stock price dropped 12% in pre-market trading." "Janet, I really shouldn't." "HR is in chaos. Apparently, 7 other clients have requested meetings to discuss their account management. Madison, they're all asking for you specifically. They want to know where you went." My laptop chimed with an encrypted message from Sandra Cole. Derek's presentation was impressive. He spent 45 minutes explaining how blockchain could optimize our consulting workflows. "We're a consulting firm. We don't have workflows to optimize." James asked him to show us how to run a basic system diagnostic. He tried to open it in PowerPoint. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, but a genuine, deep belly laugh that felt like years of tension releasing. By noon, the Silverpine Slack had become a digital war zone. Someone leaked that Derek had been brought in specifically to optimize the workforce corporate. Speak for planned terminations. The screenshot of his original hiring plan surfaced, showing my position marked for redundancy elimination before he'd even started. Then came the revelation that made everything delicious. Derek had been claiming my work as his own in reports to the board for months. Someone in accounting had pulled the metrics, showing that every Derek Whitman innovation corresponded exactly with solutions I'd implemented weeks earlier. The audit trail was damning. At 2 p.m., the press release dropped. Northbridge Dynamics announces strategic partnership with Madison Hale Consulting. They'd used my professional headshot, the good one from the company directory that Silverpine had never bothered to update on their website. The quote from Morrison was brutal in its simplicity. "Madison Hale has been the architect of our success for 5 years. We're thrilled to formalize a partnership that acknowledges her invaluable contributions." Within minutes, LinkedIn exploded. Connection requests from competitors, recruiters, former clients. The post got 3,000 reactions in the first hour. Comments poured in from industry leaders I'd never met but who apparently knew my work. About time Madison got recognition. Silverpine's loss is the industry's gain. The real talent always finds its way to the top. Derek posted a response trying to claim credit for a successful transition strategy. It got 3 likes, 1 from his mother, 2 from bots. At 4:30 p.m., my lawyer forwarded an email from Silverpine's legal department. They were threatening action for tortious interference and breach of fiduciary duty. My lawyer's response was a work of art, a simple reminder that I'd been terminated without cause, that Northbridge had terminated the contract due to Silverpine's breach, and that any further harassment would result in a countersuit for defamation and wrongful termination. They backed down within the hour. The best part came at 6 p.m. An anonymous source, definitely not Janet, sent me a recording from the all-hands meeting, the CEO trying to explain the situation, Derek attempting to maintain that everything was under control, and then the moment when someone asked the question, if Madison was so replaceable, why did we lose $50 million the day after she left? The silence that followed was 18 seconds long. I counted. Derek's response, when it finally came, was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. "This is an opportunity for organizational growth through strategic realignment." Someone in the background, clearly not realizing their mic was on, muttered, "We're so fucked." That evening, I sat on my deck, watching the storm clouds clear. My new business cards had arrived. Madison Hale, strategic consultant, in elegant script. No company name underneath, just mine. Sandra called as the sun was setting. "Derek's been reassigned. Special projects. They've got him working on internal process documentation." "That's generous of them." "Not really. It's a 3-month position. Just long enough for them to find his replacement without admitting they made a mistake." I thought about Derek's confident smile, his disruption speeches, his absolute certainty that I was just another replaceable cog. He wanted to replace inefficiencies, Funny how the biggest inefficiency was the one they brought in to identify inefficiencies. Sandra said, "By the way, James wants to know if you're available for a celebration dinner Friday night. The entire board wants to meet the woman who's been keeping us running all these years." I looked at my calendar. Beautifully, gloriously empty except for Northbridge. I think I can make that work. The ghost had become the architect, and the architect was just getting started. Friday's celebration dinner was at the Sterling Room, Riverton's most exclusive restaurant, the kind of place where Silverpine executives took clients they were desperate to impress. I'd made reservations here for others dozens of times, but had never walked through the doors myself. Tonight, the reservation was under my name. James Morrison stood when I entered the private dining room, and the entire Northbridge board followed suit. 8 of the most powerful people in the consulting industry, standing for the woman Silverpine had deemed replaceable. "Madison," Morrison smiled warmly, pulling out my chair. "We've been waiting a long time for this moment." Sandra raised her glass of champagne. "To the ghost architect, who's finally stepped into the light." The ghost architect. Word had gotten around fast. "We need to tell you something," Morrison said after the toast. "We've been planning this for 6 months." I set down my glass carefully. "Excuse me?" When Derek started making noise about optimization, we knew what was coming. Sandra kept us informed about the internal politics at Silverpine. We couldn't interfere directly. That would have been unethical. But we could make sure you had options when the inevitable happened. "The dual retainer agreement," I said slowly. "Sandra suggested it." Sandra smiled. "Guilty, though you made it easy by being indispensable. All we did was make sure the paperwork reflected reality." "But the timing was Derek's choice entirely," Morrison interrupted. "We just made sure we were ready when he pulled the trigger. Though I admit, we didn't expect him to hand us such a perfect breach of contract. That was pure hubris on his part." My phone buzzed with a news alert. TechCrunch had picked up the story. Silverpine Strategies stock plummets 30% after losing key client and star employee. The article was brutal. Industry analysts were calling it a masterclass in management failure. Someone had leaked Derek's innovation workshops, complete with photos of his sticky note masterpieces. The comparison between his buzzword-filled presentations and my technical documentation was devastating. But the real knife twist was the quote from an anonymous Silverpine employee. "We called her the ghost architect because she built everything while staying invisible. Turns out, when you exorcise a ghost that's holding up your house, the whole thing collapses." "There's something else," Morrison said, pulling out a folder. 3 more companies have reached out to us this week. They want to know if you're available for consulting. Apparently, their current vendors have been promising Derek Whitman-style innovation. They're terrified. I couldn't help but laugh. Derek's name had become a warning, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. At 10 p.m., as dinner was winding down, Sandra's phone rang. She glanced at it, then showed me the screen. Derek Whitman. "Should I?" she asked. "Put it on speaker." Morrison said, "This should be good." "Sandra, thank you for taking my call." Derek's voice was different. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by something desperate. "I wanted to discuss potential opportunities for collaboration." "Derek, you're on speaker with the board." A pause. That's fine. I believe my experience with transition management could be valuable for your ongoing optimization needs." Optimization. Morrison's voice was deadly quiet, like when you optimized Madison out of Silverpine. "That was a strategic decision based on your complete inability to recognize competence because it didn't come wrapped in a PowerPoint presentation." Morrison cut him off. "Do you know what Madison's first action was after joining us? She fixed the system failure you caused. Took her 3 hours to undo 3 weeks of your innovation." Silence. "Derek," Sandra said, almost gently, "you don't even know what we do you? You've never actually understood what Madison was managing." I can learn. I'm very adaptable. Madison learned our systems by working 18-hour days for 6 months. Morrison said, "She rebuilt our entire infrastructure from scratch. She knows every line of code, every integration point, every custom solution. What you call historical context, we call irreplaceable expertise." I could work under Madison, Derek said quietly, and the desperation was naked now. As her assistant, maybe, I could learn from her. The entire table turned to look at me. I picked up Sandra's phone. "Derek, this is Madison." "Madison. Thank God. Listen, I know things got complicated, but Derek, do you remember what you told me during my termination?" What? "You said it was about replacing inefficiencies with opportunities for mutual growth." "Madison, that was just—" "No, Derek, you were right, completely right, and I want to thank you." "You what?" "You gave me the opportunity to stop carrying mediocrity on my shoulders. You freed me from 12 years of being invisible while people like you took credit for my work. You handed me the keys to my own future when you thought you were locking me out." "Madison, please." "The answer is no. Derek, to whatever you're about to ask, no. But here's some free consulting update your LinkedIn. Silverpine is about to announce more optimizations. And this time, you're not the one making the list. You're on it." I hung up. The table was silent for a moment. Then Morrison started clapping. Slowly at first. Then the others joined in. "That," he said, "was 12 years of frustration finally getting its say." My phone buzzed with one final message of the evening. Janet, from her personal email. "Derek just got called into an emergency meeting. Security is already at his desk. The ghost architect sends her regards. That's what everyone's saying. Madison, you've become a legend." I looked around the table at my new partners, my name on the contract, my future entirely in my own hands. The ghost didn't need revenge. The ghost just needed to stop holding up everyone else's inadequacy. The collapse that followed was just gravity doing its work. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Northbridge Tower, watching them install the new company placard in the building directory. Madison Hale Strategic Consulting Suite 2100, 21st floor, corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Riverton, the same view Silverpine executives had from their offices, except 1 floor higher. That wasn't an accident. The news of Derek's termination had made barely a ripple in the press, just another line item in Silverpine's restructuring initiative that eliminated 40% of their middle management, but the Whisper Network knew the truth. Derek Whitman had become a verb in our industry. "Don't Derek this up" meant don't destroy something valuable while chasing buzzwords. Silverpine never recovered from losing Northbridge. The dominoes fell fast. 3 more major clients left within a month, citing concerns about service continuity. Their stock price stabilized at 50% of its former value. They'd brought in crisis management consultants, which was ironic for a consulting firm. Last I heard, they were being acquired by a competitor for a fraction of their previous valuation. The CEO had resigned to pursue other opportunities. The head of HR took early retirement. The entire leadership team that had enabled Derek's power play was gone, replaced by people who understood that competence matters more than confidence. Derek himself had started a consulting firm, Whitman Innovation Solutions. His LinkedIn tagline read, "Disrupting traditional paradigms through empathy-driven solutions." He had 12 followers. His mother was still one of them. He'd sent me 17 emails over the past 6 months. I'd read none of them, but my assistant summarized increasingly desperate offers to collaborate, synergize, and eventually just begging for an introduction to anyone who might hire him. The last one simply said, "I'm sorry. I archived it unread like all the others." Meanwhile, my firm had grown from 1 client to 12, not because I marketed myself, but because word spread. The ghost architect who'd brought down Silverpine, the woman who'd turned corporate termination into a $50 million power play, every company running on the shoulders of invisible talent suddenly wanted to make sure they weren't creating their own Madison Hale situation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become a highly paid consultant teaching companies how not to lose the employees they'd been ignoring for years. Sandra Cole joined me at the window, watching the city wake up below us. The Journal wants to do a feature on you. The Revenge of the Invisible Employee. I didn't do it for revenge, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. No, she agreed, but that's what makes it perfect. You didn't set out to destroy them. You just stopped propping them up. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, 9 a.m. board meeting with my newest client, a Fortune 500 company whose entire technical infrastructure was apparently being held together by 3 overworked, underpaid engineers they'd never promoted. You know what the best part is, I said, gathering my things. What's that? Silverpine's new management team just sent me a consulting request. They want help identifying and retaining critical talent. Sandra nearly choked on her coffee. You're joking. $200,000 contract to audit their employee value matrix and design a retention strategy for high-impact contributors. Are you going to take it? I smiled, thinking of all those years in the shadows, all those nights fixing other people's mistakes while they got promoted above me. Already did. My first recommendation was to create a position called Ghost Architect, someone whose entire job is to identify the invisible employees holding up the company. That's either brilliant or sadistic. It's both. They'll spend the next year paranoid about losing people they never knew existed. Meanwhile, those invisible employees will finally have someone who sees their value. As I headed to the elevator, I passed the Northbridge conference room. Through the glass, I could see the new plaque they'd installed last week. It read simply, "We replace incompetence." Below it, in smaller letters, the Madison Hale conference room. Derek's favorite phrase, immortalized in the space where he'd tried to pitch himself as my replacement. Every potential client who walked through those doors would see it, would ask about it, would hear the story of the ghost architect who'd brought down a consulting empire by simply refusing to be invisible anymore. I didn't need the last word. I had something better the top floor, the biggest clients, and my name on the door. And somewhere in Riverton, Derek Whitman was still trying to figure out what blockchain had to do with supply chain optimization. Some inefficiencies, it turns out, are worth replacing. Some ghosts are worth becoming. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't burning bridges. It's building better ones and charging the people who burned you to cross them. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share your own thoughts about toxic workplaces, invisible labor, or your own revenge story. Have you ever been the ghost architect at your company? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember, know your worth, document everything, and always read the fine print.